Political analyst Ongama Mtimka. Ongama, thanks very much for joining us again. What's your response to what the President had to say tonight?
I think the measures that national government is taking were expected, especially for Nelson Mandela Bay. Again, we're seeing here that calls that are being made from wider society get to be heard at the level of policy making. Was this response is in fact, these measures are in fact also a response to cries that have been made from a level of society to say something drastic needs to be done about Nelson Mandela Bay. I think it's a good call about initiation schools. Unlike back in the rural areas where you find that there's a good distance between the initiation schools and the tendency is for, there's more individual focus in terms of initiation schools. In Nelson Mandela Bay, these tend to be concentrated, and I think they could be super spreaders, these initiation schools, because they are clustered and numbers of initiates get to be very high. So I think it's a good call that has been made. And also some of the measures that are made around controlling numbers of people at venues. I'm a little bit disappointed about the very vague 50% of capacity provision that is still being allowed on some establishments. Because for me, I think it allows for a degree of abuse there and ambiguity when it comes to enforcing compliance.
Well, I think the President said that you can't have more than 100 people indoors. So maybe that will deal with people that may want to take advantage of the loophole of saying, well, we are, in fact, adhering to the 50% capacity. I want to ask you about the Eastern Cape and the leadership problems that are there, Ongama. It doesn't help that this resurgence is established in this area where there, quite frankly, hasn't been effective, efficient leadership. So what is the plan? I know the government has sent a task team to help in Nelson Mandela Bay. Here on ENCA, there's been extensive coverage about how hospitals are overburdened, how key positions are not filled. So maybe there's a little more work that needs to be done with authorities in that province.
In fact, I think there's a little bit of a cop-out here when dealing with business stakeholders. So if you look at Nelson Mandela Bay, it had a very tight control over churches, and there was a reporting on a weekly basis, and this was an intergovernmental platform. But where government, I think, is copping out, and I think the issue about numbers, it was always very clear for religious gatherings that the number was specified at 100. But where the problem was at the level of businesses where this provision of 50% capacity was being made. So there's been great leadership as far as leading the religious sector because there were tight screws were maintained there. But when it comes to business as well as places that sell alcohol, that's where there was a lackadaisical approach when it comes to enforcement of rules. I mean, some places, for example, would remain open even at a time of a curfew. So the leadership has failed a lot more when it comes to compliance, which is preventative, and even more than, for example, at the level of responsiveness in the healthcare sector, among other things.
All right, so if we don't have great leadership in our Nelson Mandela Bay hospitals, how can we rely on leadership to make sure the enforcement of these extra restrictions take place in Nelson Mandela Bay? Ongama, you're coming to us from Port Elizabeth tonight. I'm just wondering, on a personal level, how do you feel about being in a hotspot area with these new restrictions?
It's important. I guess also I've got a personal story with COVID-19. It's very important that we take these measures. They are not enough, but it shows the extent of limitation that's on the state about some of the measures that can be taken. So I think the ball is on the court of citizens and residents here to make sure that behavioral modification is done. What I'm hoping for is that what is done with Nelson Mandela Bay will set an example for the rest of the country in terms of changing behavior, as more areas may not want to go the direction of Nelson Mandela Bay. There needed to be a place in which an example is made that when there's levels of irresponsibility at a social level, those will feed back to policy making and people will not like the response of government.
Yeah, look, Ongama, thank you so much for your analysis.